Thank you. So my name is Hannu Aronsson. I come from nog.fi, which is, I will explain on the next slide. And let's jump right into it. So nog.fi is a non-profit in Finland, and we provide a permanent email address and web address and other stuff to users. One of the main points is that we don't compete with any ISP because we don't host anything. We don't provide any mailbox or web hosting or anything. We just forward the traffic. Is it web redirecting or email forwarding? And the idea here is that you can keep the same address. Email address is typically your identity on the internet for your personal life forever. And so we just completed our first quarterly report, so the first 25 years. And this is working. Some people say that maintaining email is annoying and people at ISPs don't like to do that. And then there are some people who just do it for fun at a non-profit. But I think you will see that there are some really interesting things about email. So my idea to talk today is to talk about email, what's going on these days, and some topics that you might want to consider. Of course, this is going to be a very quick run through. But so there are some kind of good news. The spam problem is kind of being managed, at least from the end user viewpoint. We are not seeing the incoming spam amount growing a lot, and the filtering stuff that people have and other things is pretty manageable. One major issue is that a lot of the so-called transactional emails, this is password reset, flight tickets, event tickets, actually those emails look quite spammy, and so the filters don't like them, or there is something else like that. And so they don't get through to the users, and then the users call the support. Probably you ISP people know it. Then email is still a major entry point for malware, ransomware, phishing, and all kinds of stuff. In the bad side, what we are seeing kind of in the recent times is phishing is getting really, really good, and especially something where you target some company people. This is usually called business email compromise. So you target some person, you make them do something, send money to you or something like that. But then there are other things around email. So for example, people have moved away from spamming to stealing credentials like session cookies. And there is really interesting things. Whatever email filtering you might have, if somebody steals the end user's credentials, they can put the message right into that user's inbox, like their email client, and it bypasses most of the filtering that people have. And all kinds of stuff is going on. Then there are a lot of different things that people are trying to do to solve some of these problems. But the main thing is that what you can do is to try to say that this email is real email from my domain. I will come back to that, why this is not really working so well. And I have some examples so that you know what it looks like if you run into it. So this SPF has been around for quite a long time. It tries to say that we send email from these servers. And so you have this that like Outlook.com, if it comes from these IP addresses, it's probably okay. But there is, for example, a big problem that people use. There is this thing that if it doesn't come from these places on the list, you can say, do not allow other addresses, or other addresses might be okay. And a lot of places, if you have the -all, -all, they just block everything which is not on the list. And that actually ends up blocking a lot of good emails from mailing lists and other forwarding. We will talk about that as well. And so there has been a lot of work going into better solutions. And so here are now a couple of things which are really good and recommendable. So one of them is DKIM, Domain Keys Identified Mail. This means that when you send email, you actually sign the message headers and the content, and the key, of course, like everything else on the internet, is in a TXT record somewhere in DNS. And anyway, this means that the recipient can check, is this email unchanged? Is it coming from the domain that it claims to come from? And you can cryptographically verify that that's the case. And here, this is really good because it doesn't matter how the email gets to the recipient. You can still verify that it's real email from this sender. Then there is DMARC, which is trying to kind of combine several methods with some feedback mechanism. And this is actually working really well as long as you have DKIM in place for the sender. So you have this policy, TXT DNS again, and then you DKIM sign your outgoing emails. You have the SPF, as I mentioned. And then in the receiving end, if some of those checks pass, then you can verify this email is okay. Interestingly, this also has some mechanism to provide feedback to the original sender that, hey, we got email with your domain in it and it failed this check. So then you can identify that somebody is doing a spamming campaign in your name. For email that goes through something, so it's forwarded some way, I will come back to that in a moment, why it happens actually in a lot of places. So this means that if the email comes to one server, which is going to send it forward, that server can sign the message and say that when I got the message, the SPF was okay, the DKIM was okay, and this was the IP address, and then you sign this, and you have the keys in DNS again. So you're looking for, actually, if you look quickly, so if you see DKIM signature headers, that's DKIM. And if you see in somebody's DNS this, then they're probably using that. And this means if you see ARC seal, ARC authentication results. So here it says that when we saw the message, DKIM was okay, DMARC was okay, SPF was okay. And of course, this doesn't mean anything because it goes to some third place and maybe they don't trust us, but they could. And so this is something that a lot of people who are forwarding emails are doing. And so this is something for the destination to really think about. Then kind of from the higher level point, so if you are sending email and you want the email to go somewhere reliably, so don't use only SPF. Use DKIM, use DMARC settings, and then because all of this email configuration is in DNS, we recommend using DNSSEC to keep that secure. And then there is one other point, very practical. A lot of places are using IP address reputation to filter emails. So when you are sending emails, split those into different places. So for example, if your ISP sends notifications to customers, send them from a different IP address compared to where the normal user email goes out, so that you can manage the IP reputation of different sources of messages better. Then when you receive emails from outside, we see a lot of failures when people filter with SPF alone, especially if it has this -all. Nobody, actually kind of the original recommendation was use -all, but now it's this tilde-all that, you know, the sender, but a lot of the senders have the old stuff. Implement DMARC, DKIM, ARC processing, and this will really help, especially DKIM will help you get the messages through. Kind of receiving the messages that the users want to have. Then there are some points that you can think about to help your users help themselves to get the important transactional emails. So for example, you could prefer to put messages in some kind of searchable quarantine instead of blocking them completely. So when you search with the airline name, you will see your flight tickets in that folder instead of not getting them at all. And then you can use you can allow some user input to the reputation system. For example, sending, I really like emails from this domain, or I know that I set up my forwarding at that ISP, and then you can use that to allow the emails to get to the users more reliably. Then if you are usually this is called email forwarding, but we also often say intermediaries or who kind of process the email and it doesn't go through directly. There are actually a lot of these cases. So a lot of universities give alumni addresses to their users, and there are other things. There are forwarding services like Iki and others. Users configure forwarding in all kinds of cases that, hey, this email to work comes forwarded to my mobile phone or something. But one big thing is that a lot of people who host domains, they kind of, if you send an email to an email address at that domain, they don't actually put it in a mailbox, but they forward it to some third-party address. So there are a lot of different use cases where email is forwarded from one address to another. And of course, if you are one of these people, make sure that you don't break the DKIM signatures, don't add anything, don't change anything. Do spam filtering, maybe drop really bad spam to manage your own IP reputation, and tag the emails with some spam headers, because some of the recipients reportedly use that if they get email that looks like spam but it's marked as spam, then they will they trust the intermediary more. And then I mentioned these separate IP addresses. And then please, for SPF, there is kind of a hack that you could do to change the email so that it looks like a better email when it comes to the third-party final location, but that will break DMARC, which is a much better solution for the whole thing, so let's not go there anymore. Then one big question, yeah. So there are a couple of big players. So this is Google and Microsoft, and they are hosting a huge amount of internet email. And so if you're working with email, you need to do whatever these guys want. Happily, they actually, if you use these standards I talked about, DMARC, DKIM, actually then these guys will like that email and it will work pretty well. But the challenge here is that these are kind of huge companies and there is no real way to get in touch with them and solve something. But following the kind of best practices makes it work pretty well. Another interesting point is a lot of spam today comes from the cloud services, the big cloud services, and it has all of these signatures and everything is in place, but the content is spam. It's just for the spammer's domain. I will come to that in a moment. So kind of unexpectedly over some time, so the biggest change in email security, I would say, is that already years ago we started doing the start TLS, so kind of on-demand encryption between email servers. This means that if you are passively listening on some backbone or somewhere, you can't get at the email traffic. And then all of these different tries to try to have end-to-end encryption or security, nothing really worked out because they were really hard to use or you could not find the key for the recipient or something. But then kind of for the server side, so verifying email is coming from the domain it claims. This is what these technologies do, but that doesn't actually really help because a lot of spam and phishing, it comes from a different domain, kind of the spammer's domain, or they hijack some domain, and it has all of these signatures in place. And annoyingly, most of the email apps that people use, they only show the human readable part of the email address, not the actual address. So you get this, you get email, it shows it's from your secure bank, even if behind that is spammer at whatever. And so the user, it's actually really hard for the user to identify where the email came from. And it's good to remember that none of these technologies kind of prove the email is or is not spam. You need to analyze what's in the message. Of course, if these methods may fail, then maybe it's a spoofing attempt. Then one interesting question is maintaining the email infrastructure. I think email is kind of annoying. It creates quite a lot of end-user support requests because, hey, I didn't get that email. The internet is not working. I think you all know about that. And happily, kind of, at least if you look at the open source side, so this software, you can configure it, turn on all of these modern standards, and they are supported and they work. Commercial email servers also have a lot of fancy features to support these, so it's really practical to put these in place. But I think the minimum would be to look at your email server, make sure it has DKIM, DMARC enabled, and you have that data in your domain name server set up. Then it's really common and totally fine to outsource your personal or company emails to one of these big guys. But we have heard and seen that especially if you are a free small organization user, you are not really the customer of that big, and it's really hard to get support from them. So it's really good to think where you put this stuff. One thing that we see quite a lot is that email administrators, they kind of tune something every day. Like, hey, today I saw this kind of spam, I will try to block it this way. And then the next week, it will block a lot of legitimate email. And so kind of doing quick fixes that you think, they often have a lot of unintended consequences. And so a better approach might be, okay, let's have a bit longer term view. What's the trend? What's happening? What do we need to do? Instead of every day trying to hack something. And about the support load, it's worth to think that if you can provide some ways for users to help themselves, then they don't need to call your support. And there are mechanisms for this today. So for example, some web email services, they have a thing where you can click, hey, I trust email forwarded by this place where this email came from, and then it will help people receive the more future emails from those places. Okay, maybe you know, well, everybody knows IETF, but there are a couple of working groups there that if you're working with email, you really should be a member of and following. It's free, you can join by email. And so there is a DMARC BIS, they are working on DMARC 2.0. So that's kind of improved version of DMARC that I mentioned. It's a really good way of doing things. Then there is a new group called the Mail Maintenance Group, where people think, how do we maintain, the viability of email? And it's really worth, if you work with email, join those mailing lists and read what's coming. You will learn so much. Then there is another organization that not many people know about. It's the MOVG, Messaging Mobile Malware Anti-Abuse Working Group. It's kind of a closed thing, so on the web they don't have everything they provide, but they have kind of all the big email senders like MailChimp and others are there. Also the big email providers, the mailbox providers are there, and a lot of other people, and kind of work together to figure out what's not working this month, what would be the right solution, are others having the same problems as we are having, and it's really good cooperation. And they also have pretty nice best current practice documents about a lot of topics and some conferences. It is paid, but at least for us, even as a non-profit, we have found it to be worth the cost. And then remember that some things are not really any standard. People just hack around with those. Okay, but as a very quick summary, email is, it's the kind of ultimate open standard on the internet. So, if you have something, everybody can connect. You can have old devices, new devices, and for the most part, it works great. And here the good example is you have a 20-year-old webcam sending emails with the photos. It's totally broken, but it still gets into your Gmail account. And this is really amazing. And email is also the base thing that most other things fall back on. Well, some things use phone numbers these days, but you have password resets, everybody has it, you can use it. And there are other things, it's developing. There is coming kind of address internationalization, so you can have your funny characters in the beginning of the address as well. There is also something like brand indication, where you can have your company logo appear next to the message, and then DMARC 2.0 is coming. So I think email is going to stay around for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannu. Of course, you should have been at the Morg meeting this week rather than here, but...
Well, our member number 1 is at the Morg meeting, and I'm here, so...
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Ari Saastamoinen from Euronic. Okay, from Euronic. You said that it is recipient who decide if they trust your ARC signature. Is, for example, Google accepting Iki's ARC signature? And was it hard to get them accepted?
Well, I don't know about if they do that for something, but we have done it, and it's something that they could use. We know that Google uses internally Arc to track where the emails go inside their organization and make sure that they are okay. But it's a mechanism that works, and that is a question that, for example, there is no Arc, trusted Arc domain lists or something available at the moment.
Hello, I'm Robert from the NCC. I've been running my own mail server for I don't know how many decades now, but it's hard. So how hard is it? So imagine that there's a newcomer, like a youngster in the community, and they say, I want to run my own mail server. What are their chances to actually send mail to Google or wherever?
Actually, it works pretty well. The system will allow anybody to come in and go through, but it's becoming more and more. So, for example, Google is starting to require that you have DKIM and some other stuff. But if you're a beginner, you will need to set that up, and it's there are instructions online. But yes, it is extra work. But still, actually, if you just send old-fashioned email, it probably will go through.
And I mean, in my opinion, it's harder for those of us who've been running mail service for a while. Yeah. Oh, we have to add something else, rather than when you start off, you've got a list of things to do, rather than suddenly discovering the problem is because you didn't add this 3 months ago.
Okay, but if you have more questions, come in the sauna after a few beers and we can discuss it more.
Thank you, Hannu. Really useful talk.